Welcome and welcome. This is our last Biz Basics for 2021, and I'm really happy that we were able to get Marie on for this one, because obviously with everything that's been happening, it's quite important to discuss about your emotional health and well-being as you're returning to work. But let's just kick it off with our usual little quote. This time around, I've chosen a guy called A.C. Benson, who's an English academic, and he has basically said, very often, a change of self is needed more than a change of scene. And so one of the biggest problems for Cocoon is that we're used to fixing things for clients. We like to make everything add up and balance for our clients. But obviously during this pandemic, we've had to accept that some things can't be fixed, and we actually don't have all the answers. The clients are not always looking for solutions, though. Sometimes they just want you to listen. And we've tried to do that as best as we can. It hasn't always been a one-way street, though. A lot of our clients have also been really supportive of us and really appreciative for what we've been able to provide them over the last sort of 18 months. One of the things I've been telling the clients over these many months is that if they've survived the past 18 months of this global pandemic, they have now developed the resilience that is going to hold them in good stead for all their future challenges, personal and professional. And so to this end, I've asked Marie Vakakis of the Therapy Hub to join us for this last Biz Basics. Marie is going to chat with us about the opener and the return to work, and how you can support yourself and how you can support your team in the workplace. So welcome, Marie, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about today's topic as a business owner, but also as a therapist. I think I see it from so many different sides of having my clients talk about their readjustment back to work and to routine, but also from my staff and myself as well. So I think it's kind of a lot of hats that I'm wearing at the moment. I imagine it's the same for a lot of your businesses as well.
Well, that's actually one of my questions I wanted to ask you. Tell me about how you came to grow the Therapy Hub over the last couple of years.
Like many, it started off as a small side hustle. So I was seeing clients in a private practice, very, very part-time. And as I grew in confidence and recognizing, there's so much value that I can offer to people's lives. I work primarily with adolescents and young adults using a family therapy approach. So bringing a lot of families into the room, that there weren't many services that brought in those two kind of skill sets. So the pandemic, like many people, created some opportunity to grow and expand and give things a go. I terrifyingly got a lease on a place, shaking in my boots, and thought, oh goodness, now how am I going to do this? But I think I needed that bit of a kick up the butt of having the bricks and mortar place to kind of make sure that I filled it. But I really value the work that I do. I value the transformation that therapy can bring to people's lives. I really enjoy working with young adults and adolescents and looking at those early stages of development, and overlapping with working with schools, with parents. A lot of employers as well will talk about they've got quite a young workforce. So it really it's a whole kind of a big wraparound thing of early intervention, prevention, healthcare. And then as a business owner, being terrified along the whole way. So I couldn't be there telling clients to jump in the deep end and try something difficult if I wasn't prepared to do that myself. So
actually, that's a really valid point. Actually, that is an incredibly valid point. Okay, so as the workplaces across the Eastern Seaboard are starting to return to normal in the wake of COVID, whatever that normal is for them, business owners and lots of managers are facing that challenge of determining what the workplace is going to look like, and it's certainly going to be a little bit different. So I was watching or looked at a McKinsey survey which said that many of the shifts in the way the business was conducted during the pandemic will not change. It's including a higher percentage of employees desiring to continue to work remotely. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, how does an employer address an employee who does not wish to return to the workplace?
Look, I think this is a really interesting question, and I have been following some of the literature around that idea of that great resignation or reorganization of the workforce. But I think one thing that stood out to me was, I can't remember who said it, but, as an employer myself, we've survived what feels like an ultra marathon. And now we're like, great, things are opening up. I've got to catch up. I've got business to do. And we're trying to ask our staff to almost run a triathlon on top of this ultra marathon. So I think we have to be really conscientious of what people have just survived and how we can delicately balance that, while also looking at maybe there are parts of our businesses that we can rearrange and reorganize. So I think it is having conversations with your employees, and thinking about what's possible. And maybe let's trial it for another 3 months. Let's give it another 6 months. Because I think, we give the best hours of our day and the best years of our life to our work.
Yeah.
And I think we really have to recognize just how precious that is. And we can recognize the loyalty of our employees. We can recognize their skill set and build a bit of trust. So I don't know if there's one size fits all. I mean, if you're working in retail, maybe you can't work from home, but perhaps as you can, or there's more flexibility, and there are other things in life that person has found some joy in or some balance in, that we can really value, because I think pay is not just the only thing people value anymore.
Yeah. I think there's lots of people who've made some reevaluations during the last 18 months about how they want to be working in their lives going forward, that's for sure. Okay, so there's a saying about do not get stuck with the things you cannot control. So can those functional changes that we make at work help us change within and then assist in getting out of our own heads while we're actually in the workplace?
There's so many parts to that question. So I think the getting stuck in your own head, I mean, we kind of all do that. So maybe as an employer going into those conversations with, there are some bits about our role we can't change. These are the non-negotiables, but we've also learned that XYZ is possible. Let's have a conversation. So, there is quite a lot there that we can shift our mindset, and that can impact our mood. It's basic of, cognitive behavioral therapy, that the theory behind that. But the pandemic has shown us that incredible flexibility and, God, the word of the year, pivoting.
Yeah, I use it, don't worry.
Pivoting. So there might be some things that we can rethink. But then some people also like structure and stability and are really desperately craving some things to return to normal. So I think we need to examine what comes up for us first before we then have a chat to others.
That's actually a really valid point. I'm doing some work on culture in a workplace at the moment, and looking at the culture that's sort of at the top there, and the awareness. I was listening also to a podcast the other day, and the person was actually talking about when you're at work, be aware of yourself and what you're thinking, what you're listening to, what you're saying, before you actually make judgments and also then begin to speak. And I found that to be really quite fascinating. And that approach is exactly spot on. What you're saying is, just think about what's going on around you before you actually open up your mouth. Yes, it can be interesting. I find it particularly challenging at the moment too, because you have a lot of workplaces that, you're right, you can't go remote. It's impossible to actually work remotely. And then you'll have those people who were part-time before, and so they were only in the office 2 or 3 days a week anyway, who now also want to try and work a couple of days from home. And as an office worker, I'm standing back going, but we need you in the office at some point, because that's about bonding with the team, building this team culture and all this kind of stuff. So it's a really tricky road, I reckon, we're on at the moment. It's really, really almost a minefield, actually.
It is. And I want to address, there's 2 bits that came up for me as you were saying that. One around the staff culture and what's happening for you made me think of, I'm reading this book called Rocket Fuel. I don't know if any of your viewers have have read it, but he talks about this study where they got some people to have headphones on and listen to a tune. I think it was Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then the other person didn't know what tune they were listening to. And it was, so let's say I've got the headphones on and I'm listening to it, and I have to tap it out to you, and you have to try and guess what song I'm tapping. And it was like a really, really small percentage got it right. So really showing this idea that we can have all these ideas in our head. We can hear the tune, we can hear the melody, we can hear the lyrics, but to the other person, they're just hearing. And we're like, why aren't you getting this? Can't you? So I think we need to be really aware of, we might have these grand ideas around culture and connection. This is what it might look like. But to other people, they're just hearing the tap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really powerful metaphor of, we need to be a bit more clear about that, have conversations about it, because we might have this beautiful idea of, oh, every Monday's a staff meeting. This is what it would look like. And others like, I'm just hearing tap, tap, tap.
I really like that. Actually, that's going to go through my mind for a little while. I can tell you, I have a child, obviously, and he will say to me, sometimes, Mum, when you open your mouth, all I hear is blah, blah, blah. And it's a bit like that, I think.
Yeah, it can be. So, I think that flexibility is worth it. And maybe we restructure, how it looks entirely. Like, I remember in my undergrad, there was a side stream of the psychology course that I did where it was for people in rural Australia. So they would have a 2-day intensive. So people could fly in, book accommodation, and then they would go remote, and then they would fly. So they had the term dates booked out. And then I've seen other courses where they have the whole thing remotely. So, there are different ways to do it. If we just want to try and replicate what we do face-to-face online, it might not work. But if you restructure it and you have your team building events or a monthly meeting or another way of managing that, and people know what's expected of them, I think that's fine. We can work with that.
Yeah, I like that idea, actually. We don't always need to get in the office at the same time to build culture in a way. So I totally understand what you're saying. Okay, so I suppose there's a lot of things that we can actually do to change our approach to work. We can change our clothing, discard the lycra, get out of the active we could get into work a little bit earlier and get ourselves set and get our mindset set for the staff. We can listen to our colleagues more than actually physically speaking. We can eat healthier foods at the right time of the day. And we can do other little things a little bit different next time. So in being adaptable to changing something, what do we need to embrace after all that's all happened? If we've put all those other things in the background in place, how do we then need to embrace what the changes are?
In terms of readjusting back to...
Yeah.
I think it's recognizing that even positive change can be anxiety provoking. So we are creatures of habit. And, we've adjusted and adapted in a way to our new routines. As much of bits we love, bits we hated, we've adapted. So recognizing that even positive change can cause some anxiety. And it's trying to ease into it. So, what we call, graded exposure. So you're not going to just jump straight into, all right, I'm going to get up at 5:30 and go to the gym and walk the dog. And like, that might just be too much. So it's not avoiding it completely, but not overloading yourself. And, it's almost like when you start a new job, I think it can take 3 to 6 months to kind of adjust. So whenever I'm working with someone who's making a big lifestyle change, like changing a new job, we might prescribe a bit more downtime or self-care. So maybe perhaps prior to this, you could go out 2 or 3 weeknights a week, or you could get up early to go to the gym, or you could meet your friend for a run. Maybe you just adapt that a little bit and you do a little bit less things that you're overcommitted to. So then you don't feel the anxiety of, I have to also do this when I get home. So I think it's around putting in that self-care and then being kind to yourself, not thinking, why can't I just do this? I used to be able to do it. Why are they adjusting better than me? And just saying it takes time.
Yeah. So what are some of your self-care? Well, you and I have obviously talked about this before, but what are your self-care tips for people?
Exercise is a really big one. I know everyone harps on about this, but it doesn't have to be, heavy weights at the gym. But we know that movement is one of the best ways to reduce stress. So it helps the body process all the cortisol and the adrenaline that we build up through stress. So that movement is huge. I personally like an active commute when the weather allows for it. Melbourne will know what I mean. It is grey and miserable outside, but I'll walk or ride to work. And I feel that gives me that separation, which is what I really missed working from home, to be honest. I like accountability buddies. So I have a friend that meets me at the park a few times a week to walk the dogs. And I don't bail on her. And sometimes we both want the other to bail because it's really cold outside, but we know we have to walk the dogs. So it's, small things like that. Getting good night's sleep. I think it's really hard to be, to try something new and to have that self-control if you're fatigued, if you're tired. Yeah. It's going to be harder to make healthy choices of food to eat. It's going to be harder to show empathy to your staff or to yourself. It's going to be harder to have tough conversations if you're really tired. So setting yourself up for a really good night's sleep, I'd say sleep and exercise are the two big ones.
Yeah, I like it. I definitely need to put the sleep ahead. I seem to be struggling with that at the moment. Okay, so if we feel as business owners that we have a team member who is struggling to adapt to returning to work, what suggestions can you make of what we can try and do to support this team member's emotional and mental well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. I think take some time to have a think about what it is you're actually noticing that's around their behavior. So it could be they're running late a lot or their deadlines aren't being met. So actually have a bit of a think of what are the specifics, and then choosing a time and a place to have the conversation where you're not going to be interrupted. It's not going to be while that person has to run into another meeting. If you do open up a conversation that then shows that they are really struggling or something's happening at home, and then they've got to go off somewhere, all puffy-eyed or frazzled, it's just so being really conscious around a time and a place, and maybe preparing them saying, I'd like to catch up with you just about how you're adjusting. And maybe you do that with all your staff. I think we do a lot around when things aren't going well, or even exit interviews. What about stay interviews? What about how have that maybe as a general checkup? And if nothing comes out, then say, look, I've noticed that lately your work hasn't been to the quality. I'm happy to work with you, but I want to check in, is everything going okay? And you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be able to do therapy with them, but you can open up that conversation as to say, I've noticed, I care. Can we help you? Can we make modifications? And maybe there are other supports you can tap into. And with someone that you have a relationship with, if you're seeing every day, it can be over a few conversations. It doesn't have to be one big conversation. So you can talk about, maybe the next day, so how did you feel about our conversation yesterday? Do you think you need a bit of time off? Do you want to take some sick leave? Or do you need to get some flexibility to look after X, Y, Z? There might be some tangible problems you can solve, but just showing that care, which is really valuable. I think we're scared of. I think a lot of people are scared to upset someone. We don't want to make them upset or cry. Or, someone will come back from a funeral and we won't say, oh, how was the funeral? I'm really sorry your grandpa died. What was he like? We just think, you're back? Okay, great. Moving on. Like we avoid it. We avoid those difficult conversations. So my biggest tips would be prepare what you want to say, think about the time and the place, and come into that really softly and say, I've noticed X, Y, Z. Can we talk about it? What's going on for you? And if you don't know the answer, then say, look, you've mentioned a few things that I don't know what the right thing to do is. I'm going to come back to you later today or tomorrow with a bit more information. And then you can call if you have an EAP provider, if you have a HR team, if you have a friend or a therapist, you might be able to then get a bit more information and come back to that person with, I've had a bit of a chat, I've had a bit of time to think because this is really important and I don't want to get it wrong. Here are some things that I found that could be helpful right now.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good idea that small businesses try and have a relationship with a counselling service somewhere so that because sometimes there can be post-traumatic stress on the person who's actually listening to the story, especially if the employee is struggling because, I don't know, say it's a domestic violence situation, just for the hypothetical, and the team leader or whoever is listening to this story and they are starting to feel a little bit off themselves. Do you think that it's as a value to an organisation to make sure that they have a connection that they can reach out to pretty quickly in terms of a counselling service?
Look, I think that's not a bad idea. I mean, as a therapist, I love therapy and I think everybody could use a therapist. Just like we go to the dentist, I think it's something we could use as a checkup. Even having, I work a lot with organizations that are quite specific with the service they provide. So they have a list of other services that are complementary. So maybe even coming up with a list of, here are some local GPs, or these are some numbers I can call, or, having something as a go-to, just like you would with, a physical issue. We kind of know who to call. We know where the first aid kit is. We know who's the fire marshal. We know where the fire exit is. We tend not to have that much of a robust plan for anything around mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
I don't think that's such a bad idea. And some of those phone lines are actually really good as well. You just might not get someone straight away, or you might. So, your Beyond Blue, your Lifeline. I think now the government's also got one for business owners. I don't know if you've seen that floating around. I can't remember the name.
No.
Let me, hang on, I can tell you right now what it is. So they had the Partners in Wellbeing. So all small business owners have access to that Partners in Wellbeing.
Right. Yes. I do recall that.
Yeah, so there are a few things like that. And I mean, as someone who goes into workplaces and trains people, I can't speak more highly about things like mental health first aid, or accidental counsellor, suicide prevention training. Like those kinds of things will get you feeling more confident with the language.
Yeah.
Maybe just reinforce what you're already doing well, or give you a few extra tools, so you feel a bit more prepared if that stuff comes up.
Yeah. One last thing, question without notice, obviously here. What are some of your suggestions to lift a mood? So obviously you walk back into a workplace and you've got an office full of people who still probably are a bit tentative about actually being there. You've got your COVID plan in place, so you've done all the paperwork. You've got the your demographics are of all the people where they need to be, so they're not too close and all of that sort of stuff. But you can still feel this sense of heaviness within an office. What are your suggestions to kind of lift the mood a little bit?
I mean, can you bring a dog to work day?
I would love to do that, except I've got 2 dogs now and one of them's crazy, so no. But I'm sure that in some workplaces, bring a dog to work day is absolutely, like, you see it all over the internet. Of course you can bring a dog to work day, but
I think that's a really good one. I've also seen a lot of places do sort of bonus mental health days, where they've actually just put out on all their comms, we're giving our staff the day off and we're out of office until this date. I know for me personally, I've given my staff an extra week off of bonus leave just for surviving. So they'll get 2 weeks over Christmas and only 1 week will be annual leave. The others, just bonus leave as an act in kindness.
Yep.
A few knockoffs early, just helping people acclimatize to that kind of thing. I don't think we need to be chained to our desks that 9 till 5 in such a rigid way. So dogs, food, some catering or some team breakfasts. Some people are being really creative and doing things like, some group PT sessions or some yoga, maybe a mindfulness, once a week they do like a meditation. So there are some things that you can introduce, but they have to be, I think, genuine. And you need to participate at the same time. I don't think staff will value taking time off to meditate if they see you working and thinking, well, are they going to then judge me for doing this? So I think you also need to get in amongst it.
Yeah.
Let your shoulders drop a little bit and recognize the importance of building that culture. Because if you're like, stuff this is such a waste of time, I've got stuff to do, they're going to sense that. It's not going to
be. Of course, yeah. I was really good, actually, during that really first long one last year. I actually did a wellbeing day with my team on Zoom, and I got all these people in, and we were doing stretching classes and a few other bits and pieces, a meditation session and stuff. It's one of the best days I think I've ever had, to be totally honest. Yeah, so I totally see the value in that. There's no doubt about that. Okay, look, I better let you go and wrap this up. So thanks for coming to the last Biz Basics today for this year, for 2021. Oh my goodness, thank you. Okay, so where can people actually find you and how could they potentially work with you? Because you have 2 different types of hats that you actually wear in terms of the services that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a counselling and psychology practice in Footscray. So we, if you have a young person or young adult who you think might need some support, you can check that out. So that's at thetherapyhub.com.au. And I also run some training. So I run mental health first aid. The focus is on young people, as well as conversations for suicide and conversations for self-harm. So they're all through Mental Health First Aid Australia. and I'm one of the many providers that offer that training, as well as bespoke workshops. So I'm having a lot more inquiries now from organizations to upskill their staff, how to have difficult conversations, what are some signs and symptoms that we can look out for that might indicate someone's not going okay. So that's all on that website as well. And there are some really helpful, I'd like to think, some really helpful blog posts around, what to say if you're worried about someone who's got anxiety or depression, or, how do I talk to my child about emotion? So you might be listening to this as an employer, but you're probably a parent or a partner or an auntie or an uncle, or you've got, there's someone in your life that you might think, actually, I could maybe upskill in that area. So I'd encourage you to kind of look at what's around, and don't think that mental health has to be for mental health services. We're humans. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And we can't separate that because we think it's going to open up a kind of can of worms. We really have to acknowledge that that's part of our staff. It's part of the human experience, and we can be a support to that, or we can hinder it and be actually really harmful.
Yep. Yeah, that's very true. Oh, goodness. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Marie, for your time today and for the insights you've given. Has been amazing. So I really appreciate that. And to anyone who's watching this, and Caroline, thank you for your little comment today. I just wanted to say thank you for such a huge year this year. Cocoon has obviously gone through, a lot of things over the last 11 months. And I'm looking forward to 2022. We're starting to map out potentially some new guests that we can actually have coming on. So if you've got any ideas that you might like to see, or any questions you want answered in relation to your small business, don't hesitate to send me a DM or give me a call. I'm more than happy to then follow that up and add it onto our list. And have a nice break over the festive season, and stay safe, and be kind to yourself, I think, is how I want to wrap this up. So we'll look forward to seeing you in 2022.